this is the inner flap or the main body of the tent, and this is the outer flap which protects the tent from the rain. What we have here are a number of pegs or nails, and the shape is something like this, and this is the head of the peg, and it always stays on the top, and it helps the tent to stay on the ground. So this is the peg, and here we have 3 poles. The 2 poles are the standing poles or the side poles. You can see a needle or a nail formation on the top of these 2, and the third is the longer pole. We call it the ridge pole, and you'll see at the end of this pole you'll have 2 holes here, 2 holes which will help the standing pole to fit in here. So about the poles, and the last but not the least, this is the tent cover, and please make sure that you keep it properly after pitching the tent, because when you have to pack up, this is the most important thing. And I have a stone here which will help me drive the pegs into the ground. So this is all the parts you have for the tent, and I'll tell you how to pitch it.
The inner flap is the main body of the tent. The important thing to remember here is that in which direction you want to keep the door. The first thing you do is fix the base with the pegs. The angle of the peg when nailing to the ground should be 90 degrees. The base has to be fixed in an X formation so that the base is properly stretched. There are 3 poles, 2 standing poles and a ridge pole. The standing poles have a nail kind of structure on its head, and the ridge pole is the longer pole with holes on both sides. The ridge pole is inserted into the holes on the top of the inner flap, and the standing poles fit into the holes on the side of the ridge pole. Now the important thing to remember is that the string should be tied in a serial order starting from either the entrance side or the window side like this, and then moving to the strings in the center. And the pegs should be inserted into the ground at an angle of 30 to 50 degrees. You can use the clove hitch knot to tie the strings to the peg, which is easier to open once you want to remove the tent. The outer flap helps protect the tent from rain. The inside of the outer flap is the side which has all these stitches, and the smoother side would face on the outside. Here also the strings have to be tied in a serial order starting from one side, moving on to the other, and the strings in the center will be tied last. The pegs have to be nailed at an angle of 30 to 50 degrees. Once the tent is standing, make sure that there is a gap between the outer flap and the inner flap, so that if it rains, the water does not seep into the tent. After pitching the tent, you make sure you put the tent cover inside the tent and the stone at the same place where you found it, following the rules of leave no trace. Once the tent is standing, a drain has to be dug around the tent about 1 inch deep just behind the outer flap, so that if it rains, the water does not reach the base of the tent. To unpack the tent, you start with the outer flap and then remove the pegs from the inner flap. Then you take out the poles. Then 3-fold the inner flap. You 3-fold the outer flap also and put it on the inner flap. Now you put the pegs and poles at the window end of the tent and start rolling it tightly. You can press the tent with your knee to make the roll real tight, and then the whole thing is put into the tent bag.